And the story I want to do will start with the mind-altering mushrooms, the psilocybe mushrooms, and they became known later as entheogens, which some of my students are the co-authors of that term. And North America became aware of psilocybe in May of 1957 when R. Gordon Wasson published this Life magazine article. I was 13 years old at the time, and we subscribed to Life, but I never saw that issue. Indeed, I didn't even learn about hallucinogenic mushrooms, their existence, until 1975, even though I started as a professor at Evergreen State College in 1972. But and I had a group of students who were focusing then on Amanita muscaria and its relatives. But the mushroom that has become the mushroom of commerce in research today is Psilocybe cubensis, and this is a culture of it. We found in the early days that it varied anywhere from 0.2% up to 1.2% psilocybin plus psilocin in dried mushrooms, and so it was highly variable. But nowadays, with breeding, this can reach up to 3% psilocybin and psilocin in mushrooms. But those higher levels can have some very nasty side effects because they're also often high in baeocystin and norbaeocystin. But this is the mushroom that there's increasing discussion of legalizing. I gave the first ever talk about psilocybin and psilocin in Wisconsin at Lake Namakegon at a NAMA meeting. And since then, it's become very popular. Michael Pollan wrote How to Change Your Mind, where he looked at all the different psychedelics. And Newsweek magazine a few years ago came out with a recognition that the Psilocybe cubensis was a potential revolution in medicine because there is nothing that compares to psilocybin and psilocin for treatment of depression, for treatment of PTSD, for dealing with alcohol substance abuse disorder, with smoking problems, with a wide range of issues. And the thing that intrigues me about psilocybin and psilocin is the breakdown product of psilocybin, and that's the actual active ingredient, is that it makes people feel much more compassionate to one another. And yet it's treated as a Schedule 1 drug. And Schedule 1 drug means no medicinal use. And yet this drug is incredibly non-toxic. I would have to eat close to my weight in mushrooms to hit a lethal dose of psilocybin and psilocin. And I have eaten about 12 times a heroic dose on the one time that I did eat the mushrooms. It took a lot before they had any effect on me. But then it changed me life in a lifetime change. I did it, the consumption in 1985, and it permanently made me far more compassionate and caring for others. And I believe that's the reason it stays as a Schedule 1 drug, where Amanita muscaria, which is way more dangerous, is perfectly legal because it makes people violent and warlike. So this is a chart that Paul Stamets shared with me, and we see on the far left, the red is the danger of the drug to others, and the blue is the danger to yourself. And you see by far the most dangerous drug of all, overwhelmingly, is alcohol, followed by heroin, crack cocaine, and then methamphetamine, which isn't much danger to others, but is a huge danger to the individual, followed by cocaine. And then very much at the other end of the scale, we find LSD, and finally, at the very safest of all, we find the the mushrooms that contain psilocybin and psilocin. So the continued making of this mushroom illegal really is inexcusable, given the potential value. However, it is important that these not be made freely available recreationally, because there are people that should not be taking psilocybin and psilocin, and those people, it can be very damaging and precipitate a psychotic event rather than cure psychotic troubles. And one of the really great things that psilocybin is good for is dealing with cluster busting headaches. And so here's this chart about it, and there's a whole organization trying to legalize psilocybin for cluster buster headaches. And a year ago, I didn't even know what those things were, but it turns out there's basically a headache literally on steroids, and people have been known to beat their head against the wall until they die from the intense pain. So it has a high induction of suicide, and there's only one drug that works effectively, and that's psilocybin and psilocin. And so I'm really hopeful that we'll see some legalization down the line for this very important medicine. And there was some research that came out in July that I don't have in this talk, but it looks like there's a potential that psilocybin, given in a heroic dose once a month over many months, can actually not just stop Alzheimer's, but reverse it and make people younger. They reported that they could see in test tube studies of human cell cultures an increase in the telomere length of DNA. And because of that, it's the animals that they were studying, mice that were Alzheimer's model mice, actually got younger and looked younger and became far more active after 6 months with once a month a heroic dose of psilocybin and psilocin. And this paper has not been out very long, but as of a month ago, it already had over 30,000 downloads. So it's attracting a lot of interest. It'll be very interesting to see whether it proves to have any value. But meanwhile, there are a number of places where people could go to have a good trip. So if you're interested in experimenting with this, I really highly recommend Eugenia Bone's new book on how to locate a place to safely have a good guided trip. And the guided trips are really important, that you properly prepare for the experience and have conversations about it afterwards so that you can properly incorporate that. And so Vital Reset is a local one in Oregon, and I'm right across the border from Oregon. And there's about 20 such companies now in Oregon, but it costs quite a bit of money, like $3,000 for a session, because there's huge licensing requirements. So it's very expensive for the operators, and most of them are actually not even breaking even yet, because there's so many different stages in the game where the state of Oregon is taking a fee. You've got to have the mushrooms tested. You have to have all kinds of steps of testing and guarantees. But so that's what is exciting about the psilocybe and psilocybin mushrooms. And I talk about that more on my website, but I really want to focus mainly now on the general medicinal and culinary fungi, because also on my website, mushroomsofcascadia.com, I've got a full detailed stories about this psilocybe experience that you can view. But of the medicinal culinary mushrooms, there's about 300 fungal species recognized as having a benefit. There's over 100 therapeutic uses, anywhere from pain relief to repair of neurological damage, combating bacterial infections, But the most important thing is probably the anti-inflammatory effect of a wide range of mushrooms. But also the mushrooms themselves are low in fat and thus are an incredible nutritional source, especially for vegans, because they can serve as a meat replacement. So they're high in protein, minerals, vitamins, and essential amino acids. And I'm interested in the meat replacement idea because one of the significant sources of methane that contributes to global climate change is the farting of cattle. And so if we can reduce our meat consumption and use more mushrooms, then we've got a potential environmental benefit as well as health benefits from the mushrooms themselves. And in Pennsylvania in particular, they're experimenting with growing fungi inoculated onto straw, onto sawdust, onto ground up hemp stalks, and literally creating building materials, and creating insulating materials, creating plastic substitutes. So mushrooms have a huge range of potential values to help healing the planet as well as healing people. And in large scale studies in Asia, we're finding that people that eat good medicinal mushrooms at least 3 days a week, and that mushrooms that are well cooked, in other words, cooked to at least 165 Fahrenheit for at least 10 minutes, so that you undergo the Maillard reaction that involves the combination of a protein and a sugar to make a new molecule that is really medicinally important. And people that eat mushrooms, and this is any of these good culinary mushrooms that I'm going to talk about in a moment, tend to live significantly longer than people that don't eat mushrooms 3 times a week, have lower levels of Alzheimer's and lower incidence of Parkinson's. Now, some of the large cohort studies that I'm talking about are these here, and I have a publication in the 2024 issue of Mycological summarizing over 100 of these papers on medicinal mushrooms. I have another paper awaiting publication in Mycological of about 100 new papers just in the last year as a result of the soaring interest of mushrooms in medical applications. Now, the mushrooms that really excite me that I want to have regularly in my diet are boletes like Boletus edulis. This is a medicinal mushroom that very few people realize is medicinal. And I think quite a few of the boletes are highly medicinal because they tend to be high in ergosterol. People talk a lot about the value of beta-D-glucans in mushrooms, and they measure the value of them as a medicinal mushroom by the level of beta-D-glucans. And boletes are high in beta-D-glucans, but I think that limited look at what's a valuable medicinal mushroom is not good because many, many more things than beta-D-glucans contribute to the power of medicinal mushrooms. Any species of Pleurotus, wild or cultivated, is extremely healthy for you, at least 10 times as good as eating the agaricus that you buy in the store. And the king boletes are also 10 to 20 times as good as the boletes than the agaricus that you buy in the store. And shiitake is spectacular for reducing inflammation and for pain relief. Shiitake tea is absolutely amazing. I never would have guessed how effective it is. But when my wife was covered with a Candida albicans infection from her belly button down to her knees and had been fighting it for 6 months, when the doctors couldn't find any effective drug or any effective topical. It was inside, it was in her mouth. And some friends of mine in Canada who've been working on medicinal mushrooms suggested just giving her some shiitake extract to soothe her mouth and to soothe her insides so she'd be able to eat, because she was having struggle with eating. But I didn't have any shiitake extract. I ran down to the store, bought some fresh shiitake, cooked up 5 ounces of fresh shiitake in 2 quarts of water, sieved out the mushrooms, which I later used cooked in a meal, and had her drink a cup of tea just before dinner. And she felt so much better. She was able to eat dinner and enjoy dinner for the first time in months. And she kept drinking a cup of tea morning and night. And in 2 weeks, that candida infection that the doctors couldn't touch with any known drug was completely gone. But more importantly, she had been suffering from undiagnosed chronic pain for 20 years, steadily increasing. She'd been on fentanyl for 10 years and was and still is on Suboxone. But even on fentanyl and Suboxone, her pain levels were pegged at 10. Once in a while, she'd report a 7, but almost always she'd say 10 or off the charts when we would go to the doctor. And 3 months after starting the tea, then she'd cut back to a half a cup of tea in the morning and a half a cup at night. We were in the oncologist to talk to her about her lung cancer, which I'll talk about briefly. But he asked her what her pain level was, and she said 5. I'd never heard that. My jaw dropped, but I didn't say anything. Her oncologist said there was nothing he could do about her lung cancer, but that what I was doing with mushrooms had her cancer in remission. But he agreed to ordering a test every few months so we can make sure she stayed in remission, which he did. And when we talked to him 6 months later and 2 tests later, he asked her pain level, and she looked kind of puzzled and said, "Oh, it's a 0." And it's remained at 0 ever since. So yes, I am stunningly intrigued by medicinal mushrooms. And by the way, on the Pleurotus species, the yellow oyster mushroom, which is turning out to be an invasive, is about 4 times as potent a medicinal mushroom as the regular wild oyster mushrooms or the gray oysters that you cultivate. Now, Hericium americanum is valuable. Hericium abetus on conifers is one of my very, very favorite edible mushrooms for taste. I'm sure it's very good for you, but Hericium erinaceus, lion's mane, is the famous one, and it's one that I use daily for my wife and for myself, although we take a break on weekends and don't use medicinal mushrooms at all 2 days a week. And the other thing we do is we change up what we're doing from time to time. So some of the things that are important in these mushrooms, ergothioneine is a potential answer to mushrooms in healthy aging. There's a ACS webinar about that. And it's an amino acid. My phone is making a horrible noise and I do not know what's going to go on. I'm going to try and get it into airport mode here, and hopefully that'll shut it up. Anyway, there's a whole range of important compounds, but I've become convinced that it's critical to use many, many different species, not just one. And of the ones that we use, agaricus is of the least interest to me, but there are 2 great reference books to read to study up on medicinal mushroom: Christopher Hobbs' book on medicinal mushrooms and Robert Rogers' book also on medicinal mushrooms, but reviewing the clinical trials. And my friends who've introduced me to mushroom creams that I use work with Dr. Rogers, and they are actually teaching him some new tricks in how to effectively deal with cancer, pneumonia, and a whole range of things. But top of the list of my favorite medicinal mushrooms is shiitake, also because of its meaty texture and umami flavor. It has a whole range of valuable things. And again, I have all of this information on my website, so I'm not going to read through all the things that shiitake is good for. But this is something that you really want to have in your diet at least a couple of times a week. And the shiitake tea is just absolutely life-saving, especially for women when they're suffering urinary tract infections. And here's the oyster mushrooms. They have up to 35% protein, 20% beta-glucans, and a wide range of interesting chemicals, including flavonoids. And one of the reasons in addition to taking mushroom powders and eating whole mushrooms, I like to cook mushrooms up in a Chinese snow fungus. So I take the Chinese snow fungus, and the recipe on how to do this is on my website as well. When you cook it with water, and I take a half an ounce in a pint of water, and I slow cook it for 4 to 10 hours, and the mushroom then gets very limp and swollen, and I put it in a narrow container with a hand mixer and blend it, and I make a thick slurry to which you can add 10 up to 3 different mushroom extracts at 10% by weight or 30% alcohol. And the interesting thing about Chinese snow fungus is it's rapidly absorbed through the skin. And then these lower molecular weight compounds that are found in hericiums and other things are absorbed through the skin, often I put it right directly on a tumor, but even just in general near where I think there's a problem. And I feel that in the stomach, a lot of the diterpenes and aranacines that are important medicinally get destroyed. And your most effective way of using them is via these skin lotions. And I started using this particular skin lotion when I was diagnosed with skin cancer 2 summers ago. And that's when my friends in Canada told me about snow fungus and how to prepare it and how to add the mushroom extracts. And I found that after having surgery to remove the one cancer, I had a whole bunch of precancerous spots, and I treated them with that mixture. And within 2 weeks, they were all gone. And a friend of mine who had prostate cancer, and the prostate cancer was spread throughout his body. They'd done surgery, took out his prostate, part of his bladder, and put in a valve so he could pee. During COVID, he didn't want to go into the hospital because he had basal cell carcinoma, and he had growths that had to be removed every 3 months. So he tried using the snow fungus cream with mushroom extracts in it, and that was what he was using to control his prostate cancer and live, and the cancer just wiped right off without him having to go in for surgery. And another great culinary mushroom that also is cytotoxic against cancer cells and is medicinally promising, easily cultivated, and supposedly delicious. I have a bag of dried mushrooms right now. I haven't tried using them yet, but I've been thinking about using them in cooking. And I think they're going to be very good against breast cancer and squamous carcinoma. So back to my wife briefly, right away, within 2 weeks of starting to use the turkey tail mushroom powder that I got from Paul Stamets, And I asked Paul what's going to work, and he just said I was on my own. Treating lung cancer was quite different than and quite hard, much more difficult than treating breast cancer, and he had no idea what might work. So I just went to high dose turkey tails, and I made a mathematical error. I gave her twice as much of the turkey tail powder as the oncologist had given her, Paul's mother, in 2010 when she had a very severe breast cancer. And there was a stage 1 clinical trial going on for turkey tail mushrooms. And so they were able to supply that mushroom to her to treat her, even though it's not approved for use, by enrolling her in the trial. And they put her on a total of 4 grams in divided doses, which meant 2 grams in the morning and 2 grams in the evening. But I mistakenly gave my wife 4 grams in the morning and 4 grams in the evening. I could have given her 100 grams in the morning and 100 grams in the evening, and it would have been just fine. It wouldn't have hurt her because the mushrooms are so non-toxic. I just would have run through a lot of turkey tail. And it turns out, within a couple of weeks, her visible tumor that we had spotted, which was a swollen lymph node, a supraclavicular lymph node, had already shrunk 20%. They put her on immunotherapy, and within 9 days, she was extremely ill. They took her off that immunotherapy. We continued on the mushrooms. In 3 more weeks, she was in remission. But not being confident that we could keep her in remission, we tried a second immunotherapy drug, which was a mistake. But I continued at this high dose turkey tail for another full year, and she stayed in remission that entire following year. And I had also added lion's mane at a half a gram in the morning and a half a gram in the evening, and agarikon capsules at 1 capsule morning and evening, because it turned out in some research that Paul had been doing for control of COVID-19 and reduction in symptoms from COVID injections, the agarikon serves as a synergist with the turkey tail. The two together work like 1 + 1 = 3. And so this is the recipe I had developed for my wife. But for 1 more year at full remission, I started to do some detailed studies, and I realized my mathematical error. And I thought, well, it's perfectly safe to cut her back to a total of 4 grams, 2 grams in the morning and 2 grams at night, because that was enough to cure Paul Stamets' mother. She went into remission and survived for 15 more years, dying of old age. So I cut my wife back, and in 4 months, her cancer came surging back. And there was a great big lump on her lower back that had not been there before, with a silver dollar size weeping wound that wouldn't heal. And the doctors told us, well, it's part of the cancer. There's nothing they can do, no help. Well, I started putting the creams all around the periphery of the wound and all over that lump, put her dose back up to the 8 grams a day of turkey tail fungus. And in another 3 months, she was back in remission again and has stayed in remission ever since. But clearly, she is living with cancer. It's not gone, it's not there, but we've managed to figure out how to do that. So polypores are popular, by far the best. It is, of course, Trametes versicolor, so I feature it in the top middle, the lower middle, the lower left, the lower right. There's other polypores that work, but they're nothing compares to turkey tail. But the other important thing to know is that not all collections of turkey tail are equal. And the other important thing to know, and I'm totally convinced, is that the turkey tail mycelium is far more effective in controlling cancers, and a wide range of cancers, but also diabetes and a range of other diseases. Because if you think about it, the mycelium has to live for years and years. The fruit body doesn't. The mycelium is microscopic, totally porous, because it digests its food by sending enzymes out from through the mycelium into the surrounding area, where it will then dissolve rock to bring back minerals, bring back organic material for the mushroom to grow. But that very porosity means that attacking fungi, parasitic fungi, can easily penetrate the mycelium and kill the mycelium. A plant root could easily penetrate and kill, because at times mushrooms and plants are in mycorrhizal association, but those very same mushrooms and the very same plants, if will go into opposition to each other, they'll take advantage, try and take advantage of the other one. And so the mycelium has to be able to defend against plants, other fungi, against bacteria in the soil, against viruses in the soil. Where the fruit body, which is short-lived, doesn't mind getting eaten because it'll spread the spores anyway. And the goal is to get those spores spread. So if you think of it in an anthropomorphic sense, the fruit body wants to get eaten. So the fruit bodies don't tend to be toxic to organisms and don't tend to kill off cancers. And in addition, if we think about the development of penicillin, penicillin is extracted from a mushroom in a fungus in the Ascomycete genus Penicillin, but most mushrooms in that collections of that exact same species produce very little penicillin. So early in World War II, there was a search throughout North America, the US and Canada, and it was a moldy grapefruit. I think it was a grapefruit or a moldy cantaloupe from the Midwest. I believe it was Iowa. I could look it up again. But that produced way more penicillin than all other samples that had been submitted of moldy bread, moldy fruit. And so that, all of our penicillin comes from that one original plant. And the same thing is true in the case of buying host defense turkey tail mushrooms. They have researched hundreds of collections of turkey tail mushrooms, probably closer to 1,000 collections and hundreds of collections of agarikon. And they have found, in the case of agarikon, one particular collection that was far more potent in controlling cancer than any others. And also with turkey tails, they found one particular clone that was better than all others. And so they grow all of their mycelium from that one clone. And so you know you're going to get a potent drug. And so you're going to find a lot of variability between the results from other products and the results from wild harvested material. Now, I'm not saying there are not other good products out there. It's just that I don't know what they are. I don't know what the testing is. The testing that is used with the host defense product is against cell cultures, wherein the standard testing is just to see how much beta-D-glucan the mushroom has. And that's a very different question than how effective it's going to be as a medicinal mushroom. So the Termetes turkey versicolor, this long history of use, and it's very, very thoroughly researched. And it does have high levels of beta-D-glucan, and there are 2 anti-cancer drugs isolated from it: polysaccharide peptide, PSP, and polysaccharide K, PSK. Both of those drugs are highly toxic in use and present some great problems in chemotherapy. where using the whole mycelium, you get a balanced response to the body, and you don't overwhelm the body with high levels of just one polysaccharide or another polysaccharide, and you get very much better results. And what I have seen with Trametes versicolor alone, and this was I first learned it from a former Evergreen student who was a student at the time that Paul Stamets was there. And she came down, she was diagnosed with, she had a lump, a breast cancer lump. It was low level. She was marked, she had it marked, and the surgeon had sized the lump and in 20 days was going to do the surgery. And she decided, she had heard about Paul's mother on that TED Med Talk. And so she tried to buy some turkey tail mushrooms in the market, couldn't find any. So she wound up buying Host Defense, and she took 2 or 3 capsules a day for 20 days. And when she had her breast cancer surgery, the surgeon was quite shocked. There was no lump at all. It was completely gone. Her lymph nodes were completely normal. She was in total remission. And I know her. I've stayed in contact with her, and she stayed in remission. And I told this story one day in my local post office. I live in a rural area. Just as the UPS driver was entering the room, and that morning, his wife had been diagnosed with breast cancer. And I told him that story. He told her, and she took the mushrooms. Same result. She had the surgery. No tumor was found. No lymph node was found. I told this story at the same time to my replacement at Evergreen State College, and he told a friend whose wife had breast cancer. And again, it was 20 days before surgery that she started the mushrooms. And when the surgeon did the surgery, they found nothing. And when I went in for my colonoscopy last summer, my surgeon introduced me to all the nurses in the building, because he's the surgeon who told me that there was nothing that could be done for my wife's lung cancer, nothing that could heal that lump and heal the wound and get rid of the lump. And I had done both. And he has now joined the ranks of the enthusiastic supporters. So what got me started was a detailed study of Paul's paper on breast cancer. And in that, I learned that she had a cancer that is normally curable by Herceptin and Taxol, and she was being treated with those, but they don't work when, as in her case, one breast was already 50% larger than the other, and her lymph nodes were the size of walnuts. She was expected to die, and it was just 2 or 3 weeks before she was out of the hospital. I learned about that in Telluride at the only hallucinogenic mushroom conference I've gone to there, when Paul Stamets was also present, the first time he'd been there in years, and he told me that story. And that guided me in what I was doing. And there's a number of interesting papers that support the general success here. And I'll talk about one now that I'm not enthusiastic about, and that's Inonotus obliqua, chaga. It's used as a health food by many people. Many people drink chaga tea regularly, but it's not a fruit body. It's a mass of mycelia tissue. And though it has over 200 different bioactive components, it has a significant problem in that, whoops, I'm sorry. I accidentally hit a button I wasn't supposed to. It is an important anti-cancer drug, but if you take it regularly, you can build up enough oxalic acid, And the oxalic acid crystals are needle-like, and they destroy the kidneys. And people have died from drinking shiitake tea regularly. The other thing I don't like about it is it's a long-lived polypore. People are harvesting the whole polypore, which is A, hard on the trees, but B, it's lived long enough to have accumulated heavy metals and radioisotopes. So I think in rare instances, chaga used with care is okay, but it is not something to be used routinely and consumed routinely as tea, as has been common. Now, Paki Hoilan is something that I would really like to see cultivated in North America. It's actively cultivated in China. It actually is a tuber and can be cooked and eaten much like a potato. And it is very good at inhibiting cancer growth and is believed to be effective against dementia. And so it's an extremely versatile and medicinal mushroom that we're not using in this country. The one that I used with my wife in the creams, because it is specifically effective against the exact genetic lung cancer that my wife had. And that's the other thing I've learned in this process. You want to know the exact genetics of the disease, because the treatment is going to be a function of the precise genetics. And Ganoderma lucidum, reishi, works. It's good, but it has problems, especially for young children. So this is not one I'd like the idea of people using routinely, but occasionally when you want to rotate out of a turkey tail agarikon, lion's mane regime that you've been on for a month, you need to do something else for a month. I often switch to Stamets 7 for a month and then back to the turkey tail, because that switching of drugs with time is very important. And so for this work, I really want to recognize the work of Paul Stamets and his folks at Fungi Perfecti. He hasn't advised me on what to do with these cancer cases that I'm helping people with, but he has kept me aware of the research long before the results are published. So I've been experimenting with things long before they're in literature, and the research on agarikon is about to appear in print. And it shows some promising potential. If bird flu ever makes the jump to humans, we may need lots and lots of agarikon capsules until a vaccine is developed that will control the bird flu. But right now, agarikon is quite effective at killing bird flu in test tube studies. And then for the mushroom extracts, I'm eternally grateful to Martin Osis and Kevin Rurak, and many friends who've tried these things have kept me informed. Like a friend who last summer came to me, and she said she had a skin problem she would like to clean up. That's all she told me. I made up a batch of my snow fungi gel and added, I split it in half and added 3 different extracts to one at 10% each, and to the other I added 30% just Stamets 7, which was already a mixture of 7 different medicinal mushrooms. I had her use one cream in the morning, the other cream at night. A month later, we both were in to the dermatologist, in my case, to get a 1 month cancer-free report on my skin cancer. And she showed up at my house in early September with 2 cases of wine to tell me that it was a very serious skin cancer that she had, much more serious than what I had. And she had to go in every 3 months for a couple, 3 years to remove growths. And she also was told by her dermatologist, come back in a year. Now, I've been working with the Medicinal Mushroom Committee for going on 2 years now, and we have been working on a questionnaire that we hope to have ready to go in January or February, and that will go throughout North America, and to try and find out what people are using, how much they're using, and what they're using mushrooms for, what culinary mushrooms they're eating, what benefit they think they're getting, what disappointments, what problems they've run into. And my website, mushroomsofcascadia.com, under the section Michael's Extra, has one article summarizing many of the cases I've just talked about, and a second article on the sources and recipes and uses. And I regularly update those two articles to keep them up to date. And I'll give you one last story and then open up to questions. And remaining, it looks like we've got about 10 minutes. And that is on January 3rd this year, which was a Saturday, I had an unusual appointment with my dentist working on doing a tooth replacement. And he works in Portland during the week, but for those of us in the gorge, has Saturday appointments. And he wanted me to talk to a patient of his. She was an oncology nurse in her mid-50s. She had been diagnosed with metastasized ovarian cancer, and they had gotten it under control. She was declared in remission, but at Christmas time, it came back. And a scan showed a significant growth on her liver, and the blood work showed her liver enzymes were off the chart. We talked for about an hour or two. We realized it was going to be 2 months before the doctors had done all the research they needed to decide how to treat her. And so it was a perfect time to test whether these mushrooms would work for her. She ordered turkey tail and some other mushrooms. As we talked, they arrived on Monday the 6th. On the 21st of June, of January, only 15 days later, she had her MRI, and they said, well, there must have been a mistake in your ultrasound. There's no growth on your liver. And 2 days later, I got an email from her saying her blood chemistry is back to normal. I am pretty much in stunned disbelief at these things, including broken bones healing within 3 weeks, and people leading field trips 3 weeks after being left for dead and put over in a hit and run accident and being in a coma, but starting mushrooms the day they came out of the coma and leading a field trip 3 weeks later. So now I'm ready for questions, and I will stop the screen share. If I can there we go.
Yeah, we already have a question in the chat. This is from Haley and Neil, and they're asking, can you share how you made or generally what you use to make the creams?
Well, that is laid out very carefully on my website, but I take a half an ounce of dried Chinese snow fungus, and I buy it from forest mushrooms in Minnesota, where they import high quality organic Chinese snow fungus. So I put that in 1 pint of freshly made shiitake tea. And the shiitake tea is made by boiling a half an ounce of dried shiitake in 2 quarts of water. And then I just separate out the mushrooms. In fact, we're having those mushrooms sliced tonight on pizza. But then I just take a pint of that tea and cook it up with a half an ounce of the snow fungus And when after 4 to 8 hours, I just blend it, with a hand mixer, and it makes this gel-like material. And in that, I weigh it. I divide it like into 3 portions, and I'll make 3 different creams by adding up to 30% total dry weight of wet weight of mushroom extracts. So I'll use turkey tail extracts. I have to make my own shiitake extracts. I actually have a friend who makes it for me and actually can make a very professional cream. She's a former owner of our herbal medicine school. And so then we just apply the creams, just rub them in, and they quickly absorb. They're better at hydrating skin than hyaluronic acid. They're an anti-cancer sunscreen. I am in disbelief at how amazing they are. And they're very simple to make and rather inexpensive. But to make a cream that is very much like a vino hand cream, then I turn it over to my friend in Trout Lake, Washington, she's an incredible natural products chemist, and she makes any extracts that I can't buy from Fungi Perfecti.
Okay, and I linked to the part of your website that has those recipes, and that would be if you're going to Michael's website, you are going under Michael's Extras and then looking for the Michael's Medicinal Mushroom Treatments and Recipes section.
And people on my website, if they have specific questions or people that need to talk to me, there's a contact the author button. They can hit that. I'll get your email. I'll get right back to you. I can't urge too much that you work with your doctor. Don't work behind your doctor's back. And because most people do that, and it can be very dangerous.
Mm.
But if your doctor is totally unresponsive to using mushrooms, find a different doctor. Because, but I have a number of oncologists now totally convinced, and I also have one major cancer center already totally convinced. So we're making progress. By the way, on my website, I also have an alphabetized list of all of my iNaturalist postings. And all you have to do is click on the table of the species you're interested in, and it goes straight to the website. And because Wisconsin is so much like Washington State, and when I collected at Lake Namakegon there, I felt right at home. I think you'll find my book is very useful even in Wisconsin, because I cover 1,300 species. And even though you'll have a lot of things in Wisconsin I don't have, I probably have at least 500 or 600 of your Wisconsin species in that book. And then my website keeps you up to date on the changes. And I noticed one thing in the discussion on iNaturalist. You obviously know what Hericium erinaceus is, but one post somebody did had a picture of Hericium erinaceus, and it was labeled Hericium americanum. And it was called bear's head tooth. And Hericium americanum is bear's head tooth, but that is not what the photograph was. The photograph was Hericium erinaceus. And I don't know where it was. It was sort of in about the first half of your presentation on iNaturalist.
I do remember that, and we're looking at those. I was mostly just trying to show a Hericium species, but
Yeah.
that is the kind of thing we have to go into iNaturalist, and that particular identifier is pretty good, so it might have just been something that was uploaded quickly.
Yeah,
But speaking
it's an
of
easy mistake to make.
I wanted to emphasize that, or I guess a question I had, if I could get in here, was that is Hapopolis nidulans something that you guys find on the West Coast much?
Yeah.
Because it would be one polypore, I would be like, ooh, that's toxic.
I misunderstood what you were asking about. No, I have not found it yet.
Okay.
But And I am very well aware of the toxin in that thing. And so that is not something that I discuss in my book or talk about. Yes, not all polypores are good for you, for one thing, and that one is definitely toxic. But um, Western collections of the cow, uh, uh, Latiparus conifericula that we have, can cause very serious problems for many people, especially if not well cooked. And there's a wide range of polypores that, when not properly cooked, cause GI problems and sometimes even hallucinations.
Yeah, that's the thing with fungi. There's pretty much always an exception. And that one is just more important for us because in the Wisconsin area, we find it a lot more often.
Oh yeah,
People
it's a
die from Yeah,
beautiful fungus and
yeah,
but very distinctive. But no, stick to the known fungi. Uh, I'm seeing people cooking up all kinds of polypores that are just going to, they're a pain in the to deal with. Like cooking up a fomitopsis just because it's a polypore. Well, you really want to have mushrooms where you selected a potent strain and reproduced the potent strain. Wild crafting mushrooms is fine for eating them for dinner. It's not fine for uh, medicinal mushrooms, and there aren't very many polypores that are fine for dinner.
right. So that kind of leads into a question about, you're expressing an opinion about, or like a thought about where you obtain your medicinal mushrooms. So someone's asking, how can I be sure that I'm harvesting the mycelium of Trametes versicolor?
You're not. You can't. You have to take a culture of the fruit body and grow it up. And what you grow is the mycelium. And then you put that in a big bioreactor and produce it in quantity.
If you're
That's it.
producing quantity. Yeah.
Yeah, but you could do it yourself. You could grow it up on your agar plates and make your own mycelium. But how do you know you got a potent strain, the one you're working on? That's the other question. And so I'm hoping other growers are are getting into the kind of research that Host Defense uses, uh, and I'm eager to hear about such groups. But meanwhile, the ones that are only looking at beta D glucans and are using fruit bodies, uh, uh, that's fine if it's an edible mushroom and you're eating it, but not if you want to deal with diabetes, Alzheimer's, Parkinson's, cancer, heart disease.
Yeah, and there was another question, this one by Krista, asking what other sources, like other sources that you haven't mentioned yet. I would assume she means of mushrooms that you get retail. What like retail sources of mushrooms do you suggest besides those you've already mentioned?
Well, I really like the mushrooms from Minnesota, partly because my replacement at Evergreen taught them how to grow things. And I'm pretty sure they were at the same people were at Lake Nemicagon uh, at that NAMA foray that I was at, and they're super nice people, very good. They're the kind of people I really want to support. And so I buy all of my dried mushrooms from them. And what I'm buying is the mycelia products. I buy them all from Host Defense. But I think if you're buying dried mushrooms, it isn't quite as tricky, but you want to make sure that people have grown things on good, pure substrates. And because what you're growing the mushrooms on makes a difference when you're cultivating.
Yeah,
In
we have a lot of local producers of of grown fungi around here. So you could also, if there's somebody local, that's great because you can check them out and ask them personally. how
Right.
they grow things. You could even visit maybe.
Yeah, but I mean, I love to buy lion's mane from a local producer, and then make crab cakes with it. It really does taste like crab cakes, and you can get yourself shellfish fix.
Yeah. So the next question is by Hussein, and he was asking, can one drink shiitake tea every day? And it sounded like with I think your wife's journey, you were talking about her drinking it in the morning and the night, but then you kind of like lower the amount. And I suppose maybe the question is asking like, so it sounds like yes, you can, but would somebody who's healthy drink shiitake tea every day?
I I don't see a need to if you're healthy. I would reserve it for uh, occasional use, and but especially if you feel that for men, either jock itch or a UTI, any candida infection, you want to power up the shiitake tea, a cup in the morning and a cup at night for a couple of weeks, and that should, so far my experience, and everyone who's tried it, that's been their experience, will clear up the infection. And I think that's going to be a big help for a lot of otherwise healthy people that deal with it. And I'm I'm finding also that the creams work for my candida infections, where I'm saving the tea for my wife. And because when I make a batch of the cream, I'm only using, a half of a thumbnail at a time. So a batch of cream lasts me a whole year. So uh, I that works as well, I'm finding on candida, at least for me, but I haven't had other people trying that yet. But I'm have a slight prostate cancer scare going on right now, but I'm actually in better shape than I was 10 years ago, uh, because that surgeon that did my colonoscopy last year said, when I was coming out of surgery, he said, I'm going to refer you to a urologist. And 2 weeks later, he says, well, he looked at my 10-year-old report, and I'm so much better than 10 years ago that he canceled the referral. But this year they're a little bit more worried, so I'll go look, but I'm not worried. I keep on the mushrooms, but I just use a low dose. I'll use a gram in the morning and a gram at night, of turkey tail, and a half a gram morning and night of agarikon and lion's mane.
So I just want to say, because I changed sort of your question, was in a bit. If I ask your question, but you think I didn't ask it in a way that it got answered, please re-ask it. But I think I interpreted it well. But Max is now asking, can you point us to websites or studies that have data regarding blood panels and the efficacy of these various medicinal mushrooms? A graph of the reduction of cancer cells or other pathogens would be great to see with respect to the applications of these medicinals.
Um, there's a paper about to come out that will directly attach that, address that issue, and I'll find out whether or not I can put the preprint. I will email it to you if I have permission to send the preprint out. But there's and again, the other thing I can send to you is my upcoming paper that isn't published yet in Macovania, because there's a there's 100 new papers, and I've divided them by what mushroom they're focused. I divided out the studies that are using multiple mushrooms, and then a set of studies just on turkey tail, a set of studies just on lion's mane. Uh, the amount of research is enormous right now, And so I reviewed it up. I was current up through March of this year, and I've been waiting since March to get the review completed so I can publish it. But I can send that to you folks as well. But go to McIlvania last year, and I have a paper there in McIlvania on many of these studies that will answer the question as well. But it's a matter of looking at a lot of different studies to get to what you're talking about.
Yeah, well, I just, love seeing data in real time, and I know, I've gone through great pains to reduce my cholesterol, for example, and I can see that, it was like,
Yep.
wow, you suck at cholesterol, and then a couple of years later, you're pretty good at it. So I would love to see, like, the efficacy of introduction of these medicinal mushrooms, like those blood charts. And some of it's over my head, but a doctor can tell me, or you can kind of see on a
Right.
on the thing on the page, like where you're in the brackets of safety or not, right? And I just like some data.
Yeah. On a week ago Sunday, I was in Olympia, and Paul Stamets and I gave a joint talk, and he was talking about a paper on reducing cholesterol, but I don't know if I can. I don't have, you know, that I don't have that paper, but that work is out there, and the feeling is strong that medicinal mushrooms are going to be good at reducing cholesterol, but I can't cite a specific paper. I
Right.
mean,
Well, that was just an example. I drank less, half and half in my coffee or whatever. It was just a you know just a it's just an example of like.
it would also be useful for you to buy Robert's book on the clinical studies, not his pharmacological encyclopedia book, but he had summarized all of the medicinal mushroom papers that involve clinical studies and had data, the kind of data you're looking for, through about 2020, roughly, in that book. And then, so in my paper that's published last year in McIlvania, I overlapped about 6 months with Rogers, and I went forward up to March of 2024. And then I submitted that paper. And then this year I've been bringing it up to March of 2025. And that's the paper I'm suggesting I will send. But I mean, I'm reading like 400 or 500 papers a year. Uh, and to get this information and try and guess what might be working. And then I try it out, and I tell people it's an experiment, let's try it. And I haven't had anyone specifically working on cholesterol and getting back to me.
Well, that will be interesting to look at. But just for those links, there's the one that Michael separately was going to maybe share with us later. But I also did find the Mycological journal, and I linked the journal, and then I found the article you were talking about from last year. So I linked that too for anyone who wants to see that. There's a new question by Bob for asking, what's that fancy garb behind you?
Oh, that is our wedding dress from 1968, my wife and I. And I'm just sort of celebrating that I still have a wife, because she wasn't supposed to live more than 18 to 24 months. And we're well past that time. So we got the dress out of storage and just hung it where it's there as a constant reminder.
Well, we'd like to congratulate you both for your health journeys, and just that it's been um, much better than you had hoped to expect.
I, I didn't expect to succeed in cancer, and the last thing I thought I would succeed in was dealing with the pain. And now she plays 50s and 60s love songs all day long on this one radio station. They just have a small number of songs they play again and again, but they go on. When we get up at 5 in the morning, I work 12 hours a day, 7 days a week, helping people. Literally.
That's great. I actually have kind of like a personal question, I guess. I was wondering, is your wife active in the mycological community too? Would I maybe
No,
run into her at a foray?
no. We started out doing it together, and she has an advanced degree in chemistry, but she doesn't like foraying, and she is no longer mobile due to a 25-year-old knee replacement that's failed, and she's too old to replace it. So she can get around the house. I've been doing 100% of the housework and maintaining the orchard and the vineyard and everything alone. But now, using a walker, she's insisted on, she's taken up, she does half the dishes now, and she sweeps the floor daily, with the broom in one hand and the walker in the other, just to be doing some things. But she can't function outside on unlevel ground. In fact, can't even go up and down a slope inside. Like, we had a date going to a symphony in Vancouver, Washington last month, and it was a near disaster because we had the best seats in the house down in the front middle. And, well, we had trouble getting her down to the front, and then getting her to the middle was out of the question. But fortunately, a nice man traded seats, and so she could sit right on the aisle. But even getting out again, so that was our one outing, and we're not going to try that again. But we are enjoying life again. We're now sleeping in the same bedroom again after years of being afraid that I might bump her. So it's
Yeah, the
been
change
huge.
in pain it makes a huge difference
Yeah.
in people's lives.
So, and it's helped me so much. I'm just helping everyone now that I can. I grow for the food bank and produce for them, but also people can feel free to call me if they've got a loved one who needs help and they think I can help. It's an experiment, and I'm providing ideas that I know. And in this case, it's my over 50 years of work on toxicology. So I know what I'm doing is safe, and safe at far higher levels than what I'm using. And that's an important part of it. But what's going to happen? Who knows? But so far, I'm stunned at the success. And there is another paper I haven't mentioned that's never going to get published because Paul's run out of money and the funding has disappeared. But it looks like this is preliminary work done, I think, at the University of Georgia. I don't remember where Paul said he spent a few $1 million on the study. And basically, they're finding that these mushrooms are activating genes that we have in our body that are part of our quote unquote junk DNA. They were active when we were very young, but they've been shut down because they weren't needed anymore. And the mushrooms are reacting, activating many of these genes. And I think that's the magic of using the whole mushrooms that's lost if we try and find a given chemical, which some of my the oncology friends want to do. Well, what's doing this? They want that chemical. It's the suite of chemicals, in my view, that's doing it. And part of the evidence comes from this study. And Paul had appealed for more funding, but it hasn't come through. So I'm afraid that study is going to just fade into the dust. But it's exciting.
Yes, that is. I mean, there's some interesting research in the literature about different, like, kind of genetic kind of influences that different compounds from fungi can have. I just shared one about a 2,6-diaminopurine, a molecule which we were just talking about. Is it the one molecule or is it maybe in concert with other things? But they were at least finding just this one molecule from Paralipista flaccida, then called Lepista inversa, that it was correcting UGA nonsense mutations. So that's like influencing the genetic code, which is
Yeah.
different kind of intervention. So I linked that paper because we can all read it separately for ourselves to think about. But were there any other questions? Some people in the chat, if you can see that, Michael, we're thanking you very much for your talk, that it was informative and the wealth of information and the appreciation. So,
Okay. You're welcome. Now I guess it's time for me to go cook dinner for my wife, and then I'll relax.
yeah.
But back at it 5 o'clock tomorrow.
Well, thank you so much. And a lot of thanks from everyone here in the chat, and people doing their little like emoji things, which is fun. So I'm going to say good night to you, Michael, and I hope to see you at Lake Namakagon again someday.
It's hard for me to go that far from home
It is.
in
We
terms
can
of,
still say hope.
I mean, I really feel I need to be able to get back within a day in case something happens.
Okay,
And
then I hope to see you in the Cascadia.
yeah, I try and stay regional.
Maybe test
So,
out the book.
okay.
All right. Very great and good evening.
Okay. Good evening.
Bye, everyone.
Bye.
Good
Bye-bye.
night. Bye. Thank you.
It was good.
Good night.